If I just talked about Street Fighter the movie alone, this video would go on for about a half an hour, and I'd have so many violations of fair use on YouTube I'd get kicked off of this platform. It's my favorite movie of all time, the best video game adaptation I've ever seen, and I don't even mean in that, oh, it's so good it's bad manner. No, I think this movie is legitimately good. I think that Street Fighter the movie has low-hanging fruit for this worst film adaptation of all time. It's pretty undeserved. That's King of Fighters.
As far as I'm concerned, Street Fighter the movie didn't have to emulate the source material accurately, and I appreciated the changes made to the characters' personalities, motivations, and their alignments. It made for a much more interesting watch, as my expectations weren't already predetermined. I like Chun-Li and Guile as strong focal points. They have the most personal and direct ties to Bison, and there's a lot of weight to their stories. It's certainly more engaging than a lunatic in a funny hat pursuing a karate bum who practices projectile spamming. Ken and Ryu were very entertaining as a duo of low-rent conmen. I remember retconning it in my head that Ken began dabbling in shady stockholder investment deals with his master's inheritance for the thrill of it, while dragging a more naive and forgiving friend like Ryu into the whole occasion before getting in too deep. Ryu begins to learn what it means to fight and who to fight for after Guile shows them the suffering of the refugees that the allied nations are struggling to save, and Ken's cavalier arrogance and selfishness will only put them in the same shade as Bison and Sagat.
Here you go, Sagat. I owe you. If I hadn't met you, I might have become you.
Raul Julia in his weakened condition and doing this role because his kids were big Street Fighter fans, which is awesome, muscled an amazing and memorable performance as M. Bison. I can't think of anybody else who could have delivered these lines with such gravitas.
You don't remember?
For you, the day Bison graced your village was the most important day of your life. But for me, it was Tuesday.
Hey, with rousing dialogue like that, hey, I'll sign up to be a Bison Trooper. I've got funny hats too. What do Bison Troopers normally wear?
Yeah, sure, I might be teetering into unfiltered, biased fanboyism in regards to how I speak of this movie, but there's absolutely zero that I would change about it. I think that this film going down as a beautiful disaster makes it far more infamous, or famous, and memorable than if it was just merely okay. Ask Tekken how that's working for it.
I have absolutely zero shame in giving this movie all kinds of praise. This is like Citizen Kane of fighting game movies for me.
Carlos Blanca.
There are two completely different versions of this game. The arcade one, developed by Incredible Technologies, and plays closer to Killer Instinct if I were to make a loose comparison. The home ports on Sony PlayStation and the Sega Saturn, I'm reviewing the Saturn version, were produced by Capcom themselves and plays closer to traditional Street Fighter 2.
The sheer hatred for this game seemed to exist solely because everyone hated the movie. I guess I can understand that to some degree, but I prefer to judge them as two separate merits. Yeah, it's absurd that the fighting game based off of the movie was originally based off of a fighting game to begin with, but does that automatically put it in the worst fighting game territory? No, it's a little clumsy and choppy, but as far as I'm concerned, this game has three things that I absolutely love. Digitized actors, full motion video, and the Street Fighter the movie music, which is the bomb.
It's a look I get really nostalgic for when I see it. Before 3D backgrounds and polygonal rendering would emerge from the primordial ooze and evolve into what it would be by the late 90s, video games were still searching for what steps forward the presentation would be. Good or bad, the art of digitized actors was certainly a fascinating one when implemented. Street Fighter the movie looked better than Kasumi Ninja or some of the many other Mortal Kombat knockoffs, but not quite in the same tier as the latter. The locations from the movie serving as the stages does look decent, but the gritty atmosphere kind of looks choppy overall, and not quite as memorable as the vibrant stages that Street Fighter 2 games are known for. I could make an argument that there's too much activity going on and kind of muddies the aesthetics. The Mortal Kombat stages are far more evocative with less going on. The characters pop out rather than getting lost in all the scenery. Fighting Street the movie kind of sits in this garish color palette and it all looks rather washed over. On one positive side of this muted color tint is that the actions look far more lively when the projectiles and the effects are launched, or when you finish with a super art and that signature sunburst emanates.
And what I found to be utter comedy is that unlike Mortal Kombat that had professional stuntsmen and martial artists on staff like Hung So Pak, Becky Gable, and Daniel Pesina, nobody in Street Fighter had any kind of martial arts training except for Jean-Claude Van Damme. So there's a lot of awkward stiffness when watching these non-martial artists pantomime signature Street Fighter moves.
I've seen YouTube videos of cosplayers performing King of Fighters battles with more fluidity and grace than Miguel Nunes executing DJ's rolling Sabat kicks, or Blanca's entire offensive arsenal. It's horrendous. Maybe Wes Studi was in Food Fight on a set of Dances with Wolves or something. Speaking of which, Wes and Jay Tavari look very strange. Wes isn't the towering 7'5" of the Muay Thai master, so his sprite is superimposed slightly to look larger and it just looks awkward. The Vega's so obscenely gigantic and makes the hulking Zangief look relatively small. And what the hell's going on with Kim's fighting stance? It looks like Damien Chapla's a 7-year-old that's never thrown a punch.
Telling you, you don't give me back my Yu-Gi-Oh cards, you're gonna get these hands.
Those digitized sprites in the FMV is certainly near and dear to me and I love it. That being said, it's not as clean or as crisp looking overall as Mortal Kombat 2 or 3. I give the graphics a modest 4.5. Novelty aside, it's not quite as pleasing on the eyes as almost every other Street Fighter game. Not terrible, but below average. And maybe a bonus half a point for Ernie Arias Sr. as Akuma, because he looks pretty boss. Among the many polarizing opinions about this game, I don't think it ever quite got any credit for having a pretty good OST. Capcom fighters are notable for their memorable music compositions, and Street Fighter the movie is no different. These tunes are very catchy.
Round 1, fight!
Along with its original soundtrack, it also has the theme from the movie that plays during the main menu screen. I can listen to that all day. The sounds for the in-game combat can be a little bit of a mixed bag. The punches and kicks don't sound like they land with much impact because the sound effects kind of barely vary between them. Remember when you knew you hit someone with a standing fierce or a roundhouse kick? A little bit non-existent here, but with the more than solid soundtrack overall, it kind of makes up for the rather middling in-game action. I give this vastly underappreciated soundtrack an 8 out of 10. Control-wise, there isn't much to speak about. It plays like Street Fighter, albeit a little bit slower. It kind of feels like you had a grape knee-high and you spilled it all over Street Fighter 2 Turbo and now it's all gummy. Something Street Fighter the movie should be credited for is the early incarnation of EX moves. At a 50% cost of your super bar, you can launch enhanced versions of your special attacks. Ryu, Guile, and DJ can fire 2 moderately fast projectiles in quick succession, although be aware that they can both be jumped over in the same leap, so spam at your discretion. When your super meter is full, you can spam them indefinitely. A lot of Street Fighter's core psychology is still there with a lot of the characters, but it's just kind of slow. The execution of some combo chains and special moves are a tad bit unresponsive and delayed. Well, except for the game's hero, Captain Sawada. Yeah, Sawada gets a lot of flack for being a total joke character and a poor substitute for Fei Long, which is funny in hindsight considering he was cast to play Ryu despite not speaking any English, but he's a lot of fun to play. Also, a little bit of an extra fun note, Kinya Sawada was actually on staff for production for the Street Fighter 2V anime. Okay, it actually might be a little bit odd and probably has nothing to do with anything except for just something I'm bringing up, but in the Street Fighter 2V anime, there's a fight between Ryu and Sagat, as well as Ken fighting Vega. But in the movie, the roles are reversed. Does that have anything to do with each other? Not really, just thought it'd be something I'd bring up. The overall gameplay isn't quite as intense, fast, or nearly as responsive as other Street Fighter games. Add in some wildly inconsistent hitboxes, lousy damage scaling, and muddy inputs. It's one of the earliest examples that I can recall of a fighting game that feels poorly balanced. I give it a 4 out of 10. It's playable enough on that novelty level again, and fit for some laughs, but trying to play it seriously, it's only going to lead to disappointment. Along with arcade mode and versus mode, this game also has story battle where you play as Guile and race against the clock to get the Bison's Fortress in a cinematic abridged version of the movie. It has alternating paths that determine a quicker or longer route and determines who you fight. It's more or less the same, but the difficulty is much more staunch and stubborn. Good freaking luck beating Super Bison. He deals twice the damage, moves faster, and has an infinite super meter. And he has a great deal of health.
Bison!
If you can beat him, you deserve some kind of trophy. He makes Shin Akuma look like Verse from King of Fighters 14.
Oh, it's just a joke, you big sissy. Here, have some cereal.
There's also a trial mode. It's similar to Virtua Fighter 2's rank battle. It scores your mastery, aggressiveness, and progression with each respectable character, so think of it as a barometer for your skills. It doesn't save your efforts, but it's fun to see what grades they give you, and also serves as a bit of a cruel survival mode, and kinda gives you a reason to play it for more personal kicks. For a fighting game made in 1995, I think these extra bonus modes are pretty respectable.
Street Fighter the movie may be the worst incarnation of Street Fighter 2, but it's far from the worst fighting game ever made. They're significantly worse than this, and it may not have the same kicks as the arcade version, but it's worth to play as a novelty with some friends. I give it a 5.5, which I think is a more than respectable score, and realistically about what it is. Oh, incoming call. I'll patch it through. This is Colonel Fancy. My defenses are locked on to you. Identify yourself. How's about a look at a real world ruler? Urian? I guess you didn't see that, did you? You're not even the one who said that line. You weren't in that movie. You weren't even a thing back then. Well, maybe not, but to be fair, Dictator is long dead. That's why I'm here instead. Well, consider me flattered. What can I do for you? I wanted to commemorate you on your milestone, as you have reached 200 subscribers since your last video. Well, that's actually really nice of you, thanks. And in wake of this, I've decided to give you a gift. Call it a reflection of my gratitude. I'm immediately regretting this. That doesn't even make any sense!